This video is about the technique called Sgraffito. This is a decorative technique which involves applying multiple layers of slip or underglaze and then carving through those layers to reveal the clay underneath. Here's an example of Sgraffito. You can see that you can get a variety of line thicknesses and a variety of textures, and you can get really precise lines drawn into your project using Sgraffito. You do not have to use Sgraffito all over a project. As you can see in here, I only did every other horse using the Sgraffito technique so that I could use other glazes all the way around my piece. This student used Sgraffito to create a variety of textures in their tree, and then as we get toward the bottom, they also used it to texture the grass. This student only used the Sgraffito technique on the chimney, and then they put other overglazes later on their entire piece. This is a finished example of Sgraffito once it's all overglazed. But when we work with Sgraffito, what we do is we are using something called underglaze. Now, underglaze is what's pictured on the left in this image. You can tell underglaze from overglaze because of its green label, and the label should also say underglaze. The main difference between underglaze and overglaze is that underglaze needs a clear coat over the top after its first firing. Underglaze can be used on unfired work, which is why we're using it for Sgraffito. Underglaze can also be mixed like paint, and we have a wide variety of glazes that are underglazes here in the classroom. These glazes are located in the bottom cabinet. All of the over glazes are located over the counter. All of the underglazes are located under the counter. And once they're fired, the main difference is that underglazes are going to appear chalky, which you can see on the left-hand side of these diagrams. And once you put clear coat over them and they've been fired, they're going to appear shiny and a little bit darker. So always check that diagram and that image to make sure that the color in the end is going to be the color that you want. Once I pick out or mix my underglaze color, I'm going to take a paintbrush and I'm going to decide where I want to apply it. Then I'm going to start painting my first layer onto my clay. Now you need at least 3 layers on in order to do Sgraffito, and you need to let them dry all the way through before moving on. Here's what it looks like to cover your whole object using underglaze. If you have any sort of lid, I recommend putting something in between the lid and your base just so that it can make sure that you don't have any glaze in between. You want to use alternating brush strokes. So in the last video, I was using all horizontal brush strokes. And in this next part, once it's fully dry, and you can tell that your underglaze is dry because it looks chalky, I'm going to, once it's fully dry, I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to paint my next layer of glaze using opposite brush strokes. So if I used horizontal brush strokes before, I'm going to use vertical brush strokes now. Once you have 3 layers on your piece and they are fully dry and chalky, it's time to start the carving part of Sgraffito. As you can see here, I've already started that carving process. Some good tools to use for Sgraffito are actual Sgraffito tools, so they have a curved blade and then a variety of knife sizes on one end. You can also use needle tools and mini ribbon tools to carve out your design through the underglaze into the clay. What they look like in person, you can find all of these tools on the counter in our classroom. First, I'm going to use my needle tool to start drawing out my design. I want to make sure that my project at this point is leather hard and that my underglaze is fully dry. Otherwise, when I go to carve into the clay, it's going to get really mucky instead of carving straight through the underglaze in a clean way. For any thicker, more tapered lines, I'm going to use the curved blade on the Sgraffito tool. Now, if you start with just the point and then start to roll it or tip it to the side, you can get a really nice curved and tapered line. I really like that transition for my horse to go from a thin to a thick and back to a thin line really easily and quickly. For any larger areas that I want to carve out, I can also use these mini loop and ribbon tools. Whenever I'm carving anything out with Sgraffito, I want to make sure that the tool I'm using is nice and clean. And throughout your carving process, you can use a variety of tools and toggle back and forth and switch between the two as needed. When you're all finished, you can use a paintbrush that is clean and dry to clean off all of the extra little chunks of clay and underglaze. If you're really into drawing, Sgraffito is a great tool for you. You can see here that I'm drawing a flower, but I'm actually able to get in some values using hatching. You can use cross-hatching and a variety of drawing tools to create all of the patterns and all of the textures that you want on your final piece.